Good evening and welcome to the CultCast, the best 30-plus minute Apple conversation you're going to hear all week long. I will be your host today, D. Griffin Jones. Joining me today is our managing editor, and not the only San Franciscan joining us today, Lewis Wallace. Hello.
Hey, it's great to be here once again. I'm very excited about the other guests. I'm very excited.
Ooh. Also joining us, although his title is Editor-in-Chief, I often have to re-edit articles of mine that he's edited to fix the typos he's added. Leander Canny rejoins the show. Welcome back.
Hello.
Also joining us, I genuinely believe he will live longer than me because he is in such peak physical condition. Graham Bauer is joining us. Welcome.
Kind words indeed. Thank you, Griffin.
Am I done introducing guests? No. Also joining us, it's his partner in crime, Charlie Sorrell. Welcome.
Hey, I was hoping that Graham's introduction was for me until you got to the physical fitness part.
Right.
Fair enough. This week we have an absolute blockbuster of a show. We're going to talk about Apple Intelligence features that are coming up, but don't worry, we have exciting stuff too. Rumors about macOS, iOS 19, possibly iOS 26, who knows anymore. The A20 chip that's coming years down the line, and our WWDC 25 predictions.
See, it's already started. It's a confusing thing.
Exactly. But before that, we would like to thank our sponsor of the show. Summer is here. More sun. Well, I mean, technically it's still spring until the 21st, but spring is, things are getting warmer. You know, you don't want to spend all that time cooking inside when it's so lovely outside. Allegedly, I mean, it's still raining up here in Ohio, but I hear it's nice in other parts of the country. You don't want to spend all that time cooking, and that is where Factor comes in. Factor's chef-crafted, dietitian-approved meals are ready in just 2 minutes, taking the hassle out of eating well. They arrive fresh and ready to eat, perfect for any lifestyle, whether you're kicking it back over the summer or whether you're still at work, but you just don't want to spend every single day stressed about what you want to eat for lunch. You just take one of these out of the fridge, heat them up in the microwave, and they are ready to go. They don't feed you the same 6 things every week either. They have 45 weekly menu options. You can pick gourmet meals that fit your summer gains and goals, and a bunch of different menus to pick from, like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, Keto, and much more. Factor powers your day sun up to sundown. Enjoy more this summer. Get Factor if you want all the flavor and none of the fuss. Get started at factormeals.com/cultcast50off and use code cultcast50off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. That's code cultcast50off at factormeals.com/cultcast50off for 50% off plus free shipping. factormeals.com/cultcast50off. So, Lewis, why don't you kick it off with your favorite topic in the world, Apple Intelligence?
Tell
us what's coming.
So intelligent. Last year at WWDC, Apple couldn't shut up about Apple Intelligence. Overhyped suite of AI tools. And since Apple's engineers spent most of the last year finishing and shipping the initial Apple Intelligence features announced last year, some of them, they didn't have time to focus on big new AI features for this year's updates. However, we reportedly will see a handful of minor updates to Apple Intelligence next week at WWDC25. Buckle up because they're big. Apple will update its Shortcuts app with Apple Intelligence, according to our favorite source, Bloomberg's Mark Gurman, who says, quote, the new version will let consumers create actions using Apple Intelligence models. This would be a significant upgrade if you could actually, speak in plain language what you want, and Apple Intelligence could create a shortcut automation for you. And that's true because that app is a little thorny sometimes. Let's see. Another thing is developers will be able to use Apple Foundation model APIs directly. That would let developers integrate third-party models into their apps. They wouldn't have to integrate third-party models. They could just use a convenient API provided by Apple.
Maybe this one will be well documented. You never know. Developer joke for developers in our audience.
Are they not well documented?
No. Oftentimes, you just have the name of the function or the API and no explanation of what it actually does or how it works.
So you just trust Apple and plug it in.
Yep.
Okay, great news. Let's see. I'm not so sure this one's coming like immediately at this thing, but there's this thing called Project Mulberry. It's Apple's code name for an AI coach. They'll analyze data in the Health app to provide personalized recommendations. That actually sounds helpful and interesting. There's also supposedly a new Siri feature dubbed Knowledge. What a change up that is. This is supposedly a tool that can pull data from the open web, just like ChatGPT does. Wouldn't that be shocking? You wouldn't have to maybe open your iPhone to get the answer. Supposedly this would answer open-ended questions you ask Siri by searching online. This is just a revolution in the making. Processing the top answers and reading you a summary of what it finds. Unfortunately,
so instead of just saying here's on the web, it'll actually tell you what's on the web.
Right. Instead of here's a link, open your iPhone and read it. Let's see. I think this was a little bit of snark from the writer, and I think that writer might have been you, Griffin. Unfortunately, Robbie Walker's supposedly leading development of Knowledge, and he's the very same person who fumbled the ball in Siri before Mike Rockwell took over in the not-so-distant past. And rumor has it that the Knowledge Project is already, quote, plagued by some of the same problems that delayed the Siri overhaul. Isn't that depressing? Oh, no, this is depressing. Gurman also notes that Apple will, quote, quietly rebrand several existing features in apps like Safari and Photos as AI-powered, possibly to make it seem like the Apple Intelligence team has been more productive than it actually has. There's a lot of snark in that story there, Griffin. That's kind of... Is that fair? I think it is fair because if you've tried using Apple Intelligence, you know what a complete joke it is. So maybe it'll get slightly better this year.
The thing is, though, I think it's quite reasonable to rebadge those features because there was a ton of AI stuff in iOS. The amazing thing where the Photos app can recognize plants and animals and stuff like that. That's an AI feature, and it just gets completely overlooked because Apple introduced this Apple Intelligence brand, which they applied to their new set of features. And somehow I think the marketing team at Apple screwed up there because they allowed the narrative to be that these are the only AI features that they have. And so I think they're now retroactively trying to go back and say, well hey, we've actually been doing AI features for a while. So I don't think it's like a bait and switch to cover up that they've really done nothing over the last 12 months. I think it's more like that they screwed up by sort of making some things Apple Intelligence and other things not. And it's quite arbitrary. Why a Genmoji Apple Intelligence, but then something like the recognition of stuff in the Photos app isn't Apple Intelligence? And so to me, that's more of a kind of marketing rethink to be consistent in their terminology. That's how I took it.
And those other features were added back when it was still called machine learning.
That's what I was going to say.
AI.
Right, and machine learning isn't so hot on Wall Street, is it?
Yeah,
AI, oh my God!
The other thing, though, is that if Apple retroactively changes those other features to be called Apple Intelligence, then it's so I can run Apple Intelligence features on my phone that's too old for Apple Intelligence? How they'll brand that is an open question to me. So you, Graham, and Charlie, I believe you're in Barcelona, you just got access to Apple Intelligence in iOS 18.4. What are you using it for?
Because I'm a Brit abroad, then my Apple account is a UK account, so I got some of those things. Some of the forbidden features in the EU, I got them sooner.
Transformational, right? Transformed your life.
I just switched them all off. Well, actually, I had them all disabled anyway.
You know that the feature that you mentioned there that I am looking forward to is for the automations and using natural language to describe an automation. I'm a keen vibe coder. I've been vibe coding. There's a ton of stuff I needed to fix on this fitness app that I develop, and a lot of the code is really out of date, and I didn't know how to fix this stuff. I'm not very good at coding, and I'm using this new tool now called Cursor AI. Still waiting for Apple to ship Swift Assist, which should do the same thing. But Cursor AI, you can basically tell it what you want it to do in your Xcode project, and it just does it for you, and it's amazing.
It works well.
It actually works. It fixed loads of things that I've been pulling my hair out. Wait, I don't have hair because I pulled it out to try and fix this stuff, and it did. And it's something like I can't be bothered to learn how to use the Automations app. I just can't be bothered with it. I mean, there might be useful things, but I can't be bothered. If I can just tell it what I want, I think I would use it a lot more. And I'm pretty technical, so I just think that it doesn't sound like a big feature, But I think it might turn out to be a massive feature because it means that everyone can use the automations app without actually having to shortcuts app, without actually having to spend ages figuring out how to use it.
I agree.
If it works.
I think this is the kind of thing that LLMs are going to be really good at. Forget kind of search because it's a disaster and is spoiling the world, or using it. Kids using ChatGPT to write all of their essays and things. This is a nightmare. But having much tighter stuff like the photos recognition things that you talked about earlier, or things like this, it's perfect because it's a limited sort of set of things that it has to do, and it can use its interpretation skills. It's not having to go out and find facts on the web and then lie to you about them. And I've been using an app called, briefly used an app called Substage, which puts a little window underneath your Finder window, and then you can hook it up to an LLM of your choice. I'm using a local open source one because I don't want any of my stuff going out to ChatGPT. And you just type in, you type into the bottom, select all of the WAV files in this folder. I mean, that's easy to do anyway, but then you can say, okay, now convert them all to MP3s. And you just type it, and it works it out, and it shows you, it makes a little terminal script, and like a terminal thing, and it shows it to you, so you can, if you want, so you can check that it's not doing anything super dodgy. And then it runs it, and it just works really well for simple things like this, because it's fairly straightforward. Quite like it. It really means that you can do all kinds of things right there in the Finder that would be a pain, even if you know how to use the terminal.
So what is the difference about using that AI feature that you're okay with, whereas you're morally opposed to Apple Intelligence and refuse to enable it?
My problem is there's a few things. There's the ethical problems of the training. Then there's the power use, and then there's the privacy of sending. Apple Intelligence I trust more than the others with privacy, but
I was going to say, don't you trust Apple?
Not so much as I used to.
Get him off this podcast right now.
I know.
He's a hater.
I think where you're coming from.
Black sheep.
Well, I just, as they get worse and worse, and the priorities are more obviously shifting in the direction of money rather than. Obviously, it's a big company and they've always wanted money, but now the priority seems to be more that and less the other things that they were always good at. And that's where the lack of trust comes. Also, if you look at the sort of phoning home, if you have any kind of apps on your, like Little Snitch, things like this, there's all kinds of weird things that Apple is doing when it says it's not, things that you can't block. Jeff Johnson, the guy who writes the Stop the Madness extension, he's always got something to say about this, and he's always finding nasty things that are things that are where the OS is phoning home. Anyway, I am not against machine learning stuff. It's the AI and this kind of nonsense. It's the ChatGPT, how LLMs are used for the stuff I mentioned before. Bad web search, bad writing, bad pictures, ripping off people's work without asking, wholesale. That kind of stuff. But I see a possible future in it. It's just at the moment it's a mess.
That's fair. Leander, are you using any Apple Intelligence features, or do any of these sound interesting to you?
Yeah, I use Visual Intelligence, the Visual Lookup. I've been using that more and more. That's really kind of amazing. Some of the stuff that comes up with is astonishing. It's amazingly accurate. I was interested in a piece of furniture the other day, and it identified it immediately and perfectly. I was really surprised. It's really good for plant identification, good for insects, weird bugs and stuff that I find around.
I don't think we're using it for bugs. That sounds cool.
Good.
Well, yeah, mostly for my mom. My mom had these weird, creepy crawlers in her kitchen, and I used it to identify them. And it worked. It really did.
What were they?
And it's way better than. Oh, I can't remember now. Some. I can't remember.
Okay,
Lantfly larvae, something. Completely harmless, but. And that's about like the Gemoji a little bit. I'm not really an emoji person anyway, so. I haven't used it that much. The writing tools every now and again, and that's about it really. I'm trying to think. Well, but as Graham was saying before, machine learning and AI, has been integrated into almost everything, right, across all of Apple's software. I think it's almost in everything, like Face ID, its ability to recognize if your beard grows or your face changes, it's all over the place. Oh, I've been using priority the notification summaries. They're kind of funny. They can be pretty amusing, how they really mess stuff up. Mm-hmm. And the new priority stuff in the email inbox, that works okay. That's not too bad.
Well, do you want to tell us about macOS then?
Yeah, so next week macOS is getting a new name, and it's rumored to be macOS Lake Tahoe, which is named after a beautiful lake about 3.5-4 hours from here in San Francisco, up in the Sierra Nevadas. And it's a pretty good name. I'm surprised I didn't use it before. It's like one of the primary destinations here in Northern California. Everybody goes up there all winter for skiing, so it's actually a horrible nightmare because the traffic is just awful, abysmal, and of course it's like hard to find somewhere to stay. And but it's a beautiful lake, a wonderful part of California. Beautiful place to ride a bike around. In fact, there's a wonderful bike ride all the way around the lake. They do once a year for charity. Anyway, so apparently Lake Tahoe is the next one. That's what we're going to be calling it, macOS Tahoe.
And this apparently means it's a big deal, right? One of the things I hadn't picked up on before is that Apple picks important places in California for big releases and unimportant places in California for small releases, which is kind of insulting if you get a small release named after you, I guess. But that's according to Gurman's Power On newsletter. He said that this was an important location for an important update, and I that made me think back to what were the unimportant places in California that they had referred to,
like Sequoia, Big Sur,
Sonoma.
I've heard Californians say that Ventura is a pretty middling area. It's okay, but this is my favorite line from the article here. The resort destination serves as, quote, a vacation destination and second home site for many Apple employees.
Well, famously, what's the name of that kleptomaniac, the CEO of Apple, who was the CEO before Jobs took over?
Gil Amelio.
Emilio, right?
Kleptomaniac.
Well, because one of the first things he negotiated, his executive package, was as well as redoing the executive suites, we had a private bathroom just for him, was getting a loan for a massive compound up on Lake Tahoe. And I think, I might be wrong, but I think it was the one they used for The Godfather. The Godfather's compound, that was on Lake Tahoe. And it was I think he took a massive loan out. Apple gave him this super low interest loan to buy this compound. And, anyway, that was what he was famous for. And he wasn't there for very long, 500 days, I think, or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Didn't he also negotiate a 20th anniversary Mac for his part of his severance agreement?
As his severance package, yeah.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, he definitely didn't win out on that.
And that will not be running macOS Tahoe.
No.
So let's move on and talk about AirPods. iOS 19 may turn your AirPods into a remote camera button. With iOS 18, Apple introduced yes or no head gestures by nodding or shaking your head when you get an incoming phone call. More importantly, in iOS 18.1, AirPods Pro are now hearing aids. Well, in the next version of iOS, there'll be even more head gestures. They'll be able to smart enough to detect when you fall asleep while wearing them and automatically pause audio playback. That's just great. Currently, the only way to achieve this involves using sleep timers. However, automatic detection would be a more effective solution. Bringing back a feature from the EarPods era, iOS 19 will supposedly let you use the AirPods stem as a camera control button, so you can prop your iPhone up on a table and then use the AirPods as a remote shutter. And this says it might work kind of like the camera control. I can imagine that being true because the AirPods also have the capacitive sensing area where you can swipe your finger up and down. Although I'm not sure how well that would work if you can't see the screen of the phone.
You could always use volume. Ever since you were allowed to use the volume up and down buttons on the side of the iPhone to trigger the shutter, you've been able to use remote ones as well, which is what you're talking about, right? So I guess in a way it does make sense because you've got the volume controls on the AirPods Pro.
Yeah, bringing that back.
But if you've got an Apple Watch, you'd always use the the Apple Watch to take your selfies, right? I think it's no-brainer.
Well, if you've got AirPods Pro but not an Apple Watch, now you're all set.
Who has AirPods Pro and not an Apple Watch?
The kids.
I actually wanted to ask, when you were reading that bit about nodding and shaking your head to answer calls, does anyone actually use that feature? I just can't imagine.
I have never used it.
No.
Me neither.
No one ever calls me.
That's a problem too.
I like the idea of the thing, the shutting off the music when you fall asleep. But what I really want is like some sort of feature that shoots it out of your ear, so you don't wake up in the morning, with a sore ear. It'll be just like the water ejection thing on Apple Watch. Just you fall asleep, shoots it out.
Aren't you afraid of swallowing it though? What if you swallow it in the middle of the night?
I used to have nightmares of that all the time.
I'd like an iPad with an airbag on it. So when you fall asleep and it falls down on your face, it doesn't hit the bridge of your nose.
Also good. Apple's really into safety, so...
Ever since they added like sleep tracking on the Apple Watch and they added like the special sleep mode where it can wake you up, it's always bothered me that like it can wake you up, but then it doesn't detect when you fall asleep again if you like, shut off the alarm and then just immediately fall back asleep. That when I used to use my Apple Watch for sleep tracking, that actually got me a few times. Like it knows if I'm sleeping or not. Why don't you warn me?
Yeah, good point. You better tell them to file that one as a ticket.
Yeah, they'll totally fix it.
Mm-hmm. Now I just need to fall asleep with my Apple Watch and AirPods in my ears. Then it'll detect when I'm asleep.
And the Vision Pro in your head.
Yep. Imagine if you have the Vision Pro as an alarm and it just like vibrates on your face.
I bet somebody does that.
It's gonna strobe you, man. Just 1,000 watts.
It only works if you sleep for 2 hours or less.
So, Charlie, why don't you tell us about the Apple A20 chip?
Yeah, the A20 chip coming in the iPhone 18 and 18 Pro Max in 2026 will be built on a 2-nanometer process. Currently, the A18 chip is on the 2nd-gen 3-nanometer process. The A19, which is coming this year, will be on the 3rd-gen 3-nanometer process. Okay, so that's the facts. But that means everything on the chip is smaller, which doesn't sound like much, but it really is one of the things that makes a big jump in power efficiency and also speed, because everything's closer together, so there's less distance for things to travel, and they just use a lot less power. And apparently it's going to be 15% better performance and 30% greater power efficiency compared to the A19, which is the next one, not the current one. But that's when the process jump is going to happen. So that's cool, and it shows really that's a pretty big jump. Apple Silicon is always getting faster and faster, but 15% at this stage, the A20, that's 20 generations of chips. So the thing's getting on a bit, and it's still getting this much faster, like year over year, is amazing. But the other thing, which I think is more interesting, is that they're going to be putting. So on that wafer, you've got the CPU, the GPU, and the neural engine. That's what's on the chip, and we know that the M1 chips, for example, put the RAM on the board as well. It's like the integrated RAM. What's the name? What's the term for the RAM?
Unified memory.
Yeah, that's it.
Unified memory.
That's it, exactly. Which means that it can be accessed super fast and also used as video memory, which is not something that you can. It's like the video, the GPU shares it, so it means that all that memory. So you might have like 64 gigs of RAM in your Mac, and all of that can be used as video memory for GPU memory, which is insane. And one of the reasons that the M series chips, the Apple Silicon chips, are really, really good for AI stuff, because they can use, they can crunch all of that RAM with the GPU. But this new chip, the A20, is going to be putting the RAM on the chip as well, straightly onto the same. So everything's going to be integrated. So that, we don't have any details on what kind of difference that's going to make, because I guess we've no idea. But that's going to be the thing to watch, I think. I think that's the interesting bit.
Why haven't they done this before? It seems,
Yeah.
like you said, if the M series chips had the SoC design with the integrated memory, how come they didn't do that before with the
This is
the
using
iPhone?
a new technology from TSMC called wafer level multi-chip module technology. This allows for like the different dies to be integrated like inside the package as well, like more directly, which I don't think the M series chips have like the unified memory architecture, but like the actual RAM chip is still separate from the CPU.
Yeah.
From the M1. This brings both the RAM and the chip all together like in the same package and under the same die, as if they were all like on the same die together. So bringing them all together will reduce the thermal load, increase the efficiency, increase the bandwidth, all those other side benefits.
Yeah, I think for the portables, like for the phone, that's going to be a big deal for exactly power efficiency, battery life, and things, and heat.
Mm-hmm.
But for the Mac, I think it's going to make stuff, and the iPad as well, stuff really, really fast.
There was a rumor like a while ago that this was a while ago, and the rumor even back then was like, yeah, this is years away, but eventually this will happen, where Apple is looking at dying out or manufacturing the different sub parts of the M series chips separately. So like they would develop like the CPU parts in one area, the GPU parts in another area separately, and then merge them all into like the same processor after the fact. I think probably using a more advanced version of this wafer level multi-chip module.
Is this
tech.
the chiplets tech?
Yeah.
That's what it's called. That's not a
Chiplets.
joke.
Maybe.
And then they're going to assemble them all in America, right?
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely going to happen. But the idea here is that like they would be able to add like, 2 CPU modules, 3 CPU modules, or have a regular M series chip that's like the base model, except with like 6 GPUs, many more than they would have normally. And supposedly that's the technology that they could use to really make the Mac Pro again, to actually level it up above everything else, because they wouldn't have to make like one gigantic die that's 4 times bigger than what they normally do. That would be enormously expensive to manufacture, because they could make the 4 different elements and then just piece it together after the fact.
Imagine the die the size of a laser disc inside the thing.
The thing that amazes me about this like 2 nanometer process and the way this miniaturization is going is I think that the transistors that they're now making are like just a few atoms across. It's getting down to the point where you're getting to the real physical limits. We'll get into quantum physics soon, So it really fascinates me. I was reading about the gates all around technology that they're using now for these transistors, and it blows my mind. They're really having to redesign it because it's too small to actually get the signal in and out of the transistor. So they have to think of new ways for these gates to work. And so the miniaturization can't go on much longer, because we're really getting down to atomic levels and countable numbers of atoms that these transistors are made of.
We're a little bit away from like actually running into the wall, because I mean, on a certain level, the 2 nanometer, 3 nanometer thing is a bit of a marketing term. Like, it's not everything on the chip that is that small. They have other areas to improve the efficiency, but that is to say that
Oh yeah. It's not so much you get to 1 and that's the bottom. Of course, you could go into even smaller units, but you can't like shrink atoms. Once you get down to the level of a handful of atoms, then there isn't much you can do to kind of make the transistor smaller beyond that point.
Mm-hmm. I think they're saying that after 2 nanometers, the next level that they'll have is just 1.4. Like, they can't go all the way down to 1.
Oh, I was going to ask, is that's the lowest they can go?
That'll be the next step. They have like another few levels after that probably, but they'll have to switch units once they get below 1 for sure.
Just going to say to Graham there that a handful of atoms would actually be quite a lot of atoms.
Well, that's a very jolly point. Yes, fair point. But the other thing that amazes me about this is the lithographic printing process that you need to do these tiny processes. I think it's ultra UV, right? And ASML, this company in the Netherlands that makes the machines that make these chips, has a monopoly on that. So you've got a handful of companies like TSMC and Samsung that can make this kind of technology. But then there's only this one company in the Netherlands that can actually make the machines that make the technology. And that's now become a huge global bottleneck on everything. Like,
That happened a few years ago with the glue that was used to put chips together, the glue factory. That was like one glue factory in the world supplying all the glue to put the chips together, and that burnt down. And then
I don't think it's quite fair to compare ASML to a glue manufacturer.
No, it was the glue that was used. It was a special glue that was used to manufacture chips. So it meant that, and all of the major chip manufacturers bought their glue from there. So this was the problem. So it caused a big shortage. This was pre-pandemic, I think, but I can't remember exactly. No, and also with something that isn't relevant. Records, vinyl records, all of the stuff used to make used to make to press the masters, which you then go on to, it comes from one company, and it is so kind of delicate that this particular company had they have to super control all the temperatures, and depending on the day they have to. It's almost like cooking to make the stuff. So, and they're the only ones that make this resin that you have to use. So I don't know. So it's like having these kind of. It's definitely, when you look at it, it's disaster could be there. That was it. It was a Japanese glue factory. Anyway, sorry.
This does get at something like at the start of the story that's bothering me. Like, yeah, Apple's going to be changing all of their OS names to be 26, so that's easier. But the mnemonic I used to use is that the chip name, A18, A17, AA16 going backwards, used to always be in line with the name of the operating system, because both of those started at 1. Like with the A4 chip on the iPhone 4 running iOS 4, all of those were in sync, and the iPhone numbering got out of sync, but we're still on the A18 chip running iOS 18. Well, they changed iOS to 26 instead of 19, and it's like, well, okay, are they going to? Is it still going to be the A19 chip? Then we'll have the A20 chip running iOS 27 on the iPhone 27 if they change it, but using the 3, like all of these numbers, they're actually just adding another number when they switch from 18 to 26 that they now need to keep in sync.
When I heard this rumor, the thing it immediately made me think of was Windows 95, because I'm of that age, right? But like back in the 90s, no one numbered software by year until Microsoft came along with Windows 95, and I think it was like Windows 3.1 before that, and then they jumped to 95. And I was thinking, wow, like Apple, we've come full circle, and Apple is now Microsoft, and they're now pulling a Microsoft, and now we're moving to iOS 26, and it's a real, I don't know, it's a Microsoft move.
And it always made the software seem outdated, like immediately the following year, it's last year's. It gave it that, it immediately dated it.
Yeah.
In a way that
I think that's a good point. I think it's safer for Apple to do, because they do update it every year, which Microsoft didn't at the time. So you'd be still using like Windows 95 in like 1997. And then I guess that's the reason why they've used next year instead of this year, which means you'll never be using like last year's operating system, or if you are, then that is a way to publicly shame you into upgrading. So I think that is probably a part of the strategy as well, right? That they don't want people, and developers definitely don't want people to be using old operating systems.
Right. I quite like the idea, though. Actually, when it did make sense, especially if you had it across the board. So if all the software had that same number, it would make it a little bit easier to understand. Because right now it is a mess, isn't it? It jumps around all over the place.
Totally. I was thinking, as I was writing the piece on watchOS this week, and I thought this is like, it's made for watchOS, because, I mean, who actually knows that it's like watchOS 10 that works with iOS, 18 or whatever? It's hard to keep track of. And if it's watchOS 26 works with iOS 26, that is so much simpler that everyone's going to get that. So as soon as I heard that, I thought, oh yeah, I could believe Apple is doing that, because it actually checks a lot of boxes for them.
Yeah.
I mean, this isn't a prediction that we'll have to make this week, thankfully, but do you think in the fall that they're going to introduce the iPhone 26 so that it runs iOS 26 with the A26 chip?
Who knows?
I think it's more likely. Maybe they'll just call it the iPhone, and then they'll just give it like a year model number. rather than actually calling it the iPhone 26.
Like they do with iPads. That's so confusing, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
And MacBooks, even like, you know, when you go into like the support articles on Apple.com, and it's like the MacBook 26 with Touch Bar, and you know, it's like,
Right.
if they actually had a number for it, it would be so much simpler. So I really hope they don't take away the number. Craziness would ensue.
Then it would be iPhone Pro (parentheses late 2025). But then that would then have the current year number, whereas the iOS is going to use the next year number.
You know, the one with the shiny bevels that were a bit rounded at the edges.
Yeah.
So what in as of January the 1st, 2027, up until, you know, the end of September 2027, which iOS are you going to be running? 26, right?
27.
So it starts at the beginning of the year. It's not. Surely it's going to come out in
September. Yeah.
So the one that comes out in September 2026, what's that going to be called?
Will be
27.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's going to be the next year. So for the last few months,
so you just have like
27.
3 months. You'll have next year's operating system, and that's better than having last year's operating system for like, you know, 9 months.
For 9 months.
Yeah.
Maybe they could delay. Maybe they could announce the operating system and launch it, but then delay that feature, the name, until a point release.
I think most people are just really not going to think about this much. Like we obsess about it a lot, but regular people are just it's going to be a bit simpler for them. It's like, which version of watchOS do I need? Oh, 26. I just think for most people it's going to be simpler, and they're not going to think about it. And it's the likes of us that are like, ooh, big change. But I think
we start hearing about it in June because we're Apple fans. But like most people will only get it in September, and it doesn't even push people to update until like the December software update anyways, at 18.2 or whenever that will be.
My brother's kids are obsessed with
26.2.
My brother's kids are obsessed with like iPhone numbers. If they see your phone and say, "Oh, which iPhone is that?" and you say, I say iPhone 12 because mine's old, but they are all about like which one it is, and they can usually tell,
just by looking at it. What do they say when you tell me you've got a 12? They're like, oh.
They just walk away.
Loser.
Yeah. They just don't talk to me for any more.
My mom has an iPhone 12. That is pretty embarrassing, Charlie.
It's the 12 mini.
Okay.
Which has got the worst battery life of any gadget I've got, including my 2018 iPad Pro, which has still got way better, still going strong. But it's the last mini one. So, well, I guess the 13, but what am I going to do?
Right, yeah. The Mini is my favorite iPhone. It really was I love it. Really, really nice. In fact, I went from having when the big screen iPhones came out, I had those for years, and then last year I went back to a smaller, the year before I went back to a Mini, and then afterwards I bought the regular iPhone, which I prefer much better. I don't like the big screen ones anymore.
No, small phone and iPad for me. That's what I like.
Mm-hmm.
Do you use a Mini?
So what's your upgrade path, Charlie? What are you waiting out for until your Mini dies?
Until it dies, then I better not say what I'm going to do because it's the CultCast. I'm going to get a free phone. Running Linux.
Running Linux.
Yep.
Probably Ogg Vorbis, right? You're probably going to load it up with Ogg Vorbis files.
Shut it.
Linux. Sorry. Good luck with that. Oh my god!
Sorry, I can't hang up the phone call. I need to figure out how to quit Emacs.
Right. Okay. Well, that's when are you going to do? You're going to do that when, next year?
No, when this phone dies.
Okay.
I'm going to keep it going. I'm going to change the battery when it needs it, and this and that, because it's still great.
Yeah.
Eventually.
That's true.
Huh.
What about when they announce that iOS 26 doesn't work on it?
Well, I won't use it. I mean, it's all Apple Intelligence anyway, so who cares?
That's fair. Graham, why don't you tell us about watchOS 26?
I would love to tell you about watchOS 26, as it's allegedly going to be called. So I'm kind of excited about this. I'm a watch fan and a fitness fan, and although we don't get so many rumors about watchOS as we do about iOS, I guess because most of the focus is on iOS, I think there is some meat on the bones of a decent update for watchOS this year. The things, one of the things we haven't actually talked about much, I thought we'd talk about more, is Solarium, this new glossy, glassy, new rumored user interface that Apple's going to roll out across all of its devices. And word is, I think this is from Mark Gurman at Bloomberg, that this will be coming to watchOS 2, watchOS as well. And I'm a little bit surprised by that, to be honest, because watchOS just 2 years ago with watchOS 10 had a major visual overhaul of the UI, and that was a big headache for developers. You know, I work on a watch app myself, and you know there were a lot of changes which coincided with the move from storyboards to Swift UI as well. And you know, so to have another upheaval so soon is a bit of a surprise, but it is maybe not news, because as a watchOS developer, everything changes every year. It's a nightmare to develop in this platform because it's constantly changing. You know, the features.
How many times have you completely rewritten your app from scratch?
Yeah, so change is the only certainty with watchOS. But my instinct actually is I do think Apple has sort of the changes of the pace of change with watchOS UI has slowed down a little bit in recent releases, and I think that they're fairly happy with the layout of things now. And you know, we have those corner buttons and all of these kind of things, the tiled user interface. My instinct is they're going to stick with that, but we'll just get a bit of a UI gloss, and that's what the rumors are saying, that you know they will introduce some of the elements of the Solarium UI. So I think those like round corner buttons that we've all got used to are probably going to have a kind of frosty, glassy, translucent surface, and you know we'll see some of those elements, and maybe even the highlights to the bezels when you move your wrist around. But that ultimately it probably will be a fairly familiar layout to what we already know. One of the other rumors that they mentioned is that Apple Intelligence features might be coming to Apple Watch as well. So they were conspicuously absent last year. We didn't get any Apple Intelligence on Apple Watch, which, you know, Leander might regard as a blessing, and I would have some sympathy for that. But Apple is not going to leave it that way. So what they're saying, according to Mark Gurman at Bloomberg, is that we're going to get some Apple Intelligence features like Genmoji and notification summaries on Apple Watch, but that the Apple Watch hardware is not powerful enough to do this on device. So the intensive processing for Genmoji and those terrible summaries, imagine. But that intensive processing will be done on your iPhone via the kind of wireless watch connectivity. And so you will be able to now use some of those Apple Intelligence features, but only if you have your iPhone in range. I don't know. I think a lot of Apple Watch users never really don't have their iPhone in range. You know, they kind of use their Apple Watch as a second screen to their iPhone. But I guess for fitness nuts like myself, you maybe want to leave your phone at home if you're going for a run or a cycle or something like that, and just rely on your watch. And is that going to bother me that I can't use Genmoji, or I can't get a garbled summary of my notification that's more confusing than actually just reading the notification? No, it's not going to bother me personally, but, you know, there we are. So to some limited extent, Apple Intelligence is coming. The things which Lewis already touched on, Mulberry, and I think this is interesting to me from an Apple Watch perspective. There's these two projects, Mulberry and Quartz. Mulberry is like these virtual doctors, like a health coach that is advising you on lifestyle changes to live a better day. And then Quartz is a fitness coach that is kind of working out tailored training plans for you. And that Quartz feature might be a benefit for Fitness Plus subscribers. If you subscribe to Fitness Plus, you might now, instead of looking at all the kind of coaches that we know and love, I know Charlie has his favorites, now you'll have these like virtual ones instead. I don't know if they're going to fire their team. Maybe they're actually going to fire their team in LA and just have these bots instead to
maybe
give
they
us
could
a
bring back a virtual Dustin. Then I'd be happy.
Justin? Who is Justin?
Yeah.
No, Dustin.
He was the yoga guy.
Yeah, one of the yoga guys. He still,
with muscles.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, great muscles.
Maybe it's going to be like this is a deep cut. Maybe it's going to be that like little guy with a bow tie in the in the Apple concept video from the late '80s. What was it called?
Oh, Knowledge Navigator.
Yeah,
I hope it's the
Navigator,
Knowledge
yeah.
Navigator dude. That would be excellent. Didn't he have a British accent? I think he had a British accent. I want him to have a. He should be like. He should be like Batman's butler, Alfred.
I'm thinking like Dr. Clippy.
Yeah. So personally, coming at this from a fitness perspective, I think this is an absolutely terrible idea. For years, it's a terrible idea because the data you can get from your wrist is incredibly limited. One of the things I get frustrated about is I'll see lots of people wanting Apple to stick loads more sensors onto Apple Watch. And the thing is, they can't. Or if they do, these are going to be the kind of useless sensors because there's not so much going on your wrist. Your wrist is, the technical term is it's peripheral to your body, right? It's like right on the edge of all the systems that keep you alive. Hence, you can actually lose the end of a limb and carry on living. I don't recommend it, but it's not.
Jeez.
If you look like serious runners that want to monitor like their cardio activity, they will wear a chest strap. You want the sensor to be proximal to the heart if you want to monitor that. So the quality of the data that you can get from your wrist is poor. And this is why, some of these features like blood pressure and, for blood pressure, you really need a cuff. There's nothing you can really do visually to reliably determine blood pressure. And then when it comes to running or cycling, what a coach is actually at the track watching their athletes run. They're designing a program based upon deep knowledge of what their athletes can and can't do and what they need. And so to market some artificial intelligence thing based upon this really narrow slice of data that Apple Watch can provide as being a virtual coach, I would be amazed if Apple did this, to be honest, because they've been a very cautious company up until now. They've only claimed that Apple Watch helps you live a better day. Are we really going to lurch from that to a virtual fitness
perhaps,
coach?
there is some, maybe less ambitious coaching. Because I always found one of the problems with getting all this data, like, say, sleep data, you look at your sleep patterns. Okay, well, I don't really know what it tells me. You look at the data and you go, okay, yeah, I didn't sleep very well, but I already know that. Or I slept really well for the last couple of days. What am I going to do about it? And perhaps, the coach could come in and say, well, you were looking at your iPhone before you fell asleep. That's not a good idea. You don't look at any devices an hour before bedtime, that kind of stuff. Or turn on the True Tone or whatever. There probably is a whole bunch of advice, useful advice that it could give you. That's kind of, low key, not it's not like having, Johan Brunel behind you, telling you you've really got to push it now or whatever. But I don't know, there probably is some useful stuff that it could do.
There is, but it's not without risk, is it? Because if an AI is making health and fitness recommendations to an athlete or a patient, or we'll call them a user, then what if they hallucinate? What if they say something which results in a serious injury or death? And one of my thoughts here is, I could imagine another company doing this and getting away with it. I think death is a far-fetched scenario, but it is possible that someone might say, I strained a muscle following the advice of my fitness watch virtual coach, and I want compensation. And, what happens with Apple, and I don't think it's fair, but Apple just somehow gets so much more focus in this area than other companies. I think that's one of the reasons why they're really cautious. If they make the slightest mistake, it becomes a gate, and there's a whole media fanfare around it, like Ben Gate and Antenna Gate. And so to me, one of the things I read, and I can't remember where I read this, is there are warring factions within the health and fitness team at Apple. Some people wanting to be much more ambitious with these things, and some people saying, well, no, let's stick to the science. Let's not go out there and make recommendations or promises which we can't back up with scientific evidence. And so, I think there's a bit of a battle for how Apple is going to do these things. And so I'm really curious to see what they announce next week, because it will be indicative of who won. One of the things right now is, say if you look in the fitness app, it will show you trends. It will show you, you're climbing the stairs more, you're walking less, and it will tell you these things. But you're right, it won't make any recommendation. It will be like, so what should I do with this information? And that I don't think is an accident. I think that's a deliberate omission, because right up until now, Apple has stayed out of the recommendation game. The only things it recommends is really asinine things like stand up, 12 times a day, or things
Breathe.
which can't get it into trouble, right? Or half an hour of exercise. Those are the only things it's recommended. I think this, if they go in that direction, to me that's a big shift for Apple, and I really hope they get it right, because I do agree it could be a great feature. But it feels a very risky territory and a bit of a departure if they do it.
Well, do you know what's the current state of art and like Garmin watches or Android and bike computers? I mean, I know they do. You can get training plans, can't you? Training Peaks. I mean, there's a whole bunch of platforms out there that give you.
Yeah, you look at stuff like Garmin has Body Battery, which looks at which makes recommendations on your training readiness, and this is one of the things that I mentioned in the article on Cult of Mac, that Garmin is already doing some of these things. And so training readiness and body battery, which Garmin does, is exactly as you say, it's making recommendations on what you should do based upon the data from your watch. That I do think Garmin can get away with that because they're under less scrutiny than Apple. If Apple does decide to do something in that territory, will it be a gate? I don't know. But so far, I don't know. Would you trust Apple Intelligence with your health? With
some
your
of it.
life?
I mean, not after the.
Go ahead, Charlie.
I was just going to say, after the pizza glue recipe thing. I mean, it's that kind of thing, isn't it? If you believe it, I mean, that's ridiculous. No one's actually going to put glue on their pizza, but it was a
computer glue.
That's because we know. But if it's something you don't know so much about, and you're not an expert in this, if it was pizza glue, then we could call it Pizzagate.
Well, I used to use Training Today, which is supposed to tell you whether you're good to go for a training session, and it uses your heart rate variability on your Apple Watch, and it's supposed to be a fairly robust technique, I believe. Right? It's been used forever in professional training circles, but I found it completely useless. Like, it was actually always the opposite. It would say, "Oh, you take a rest today," but I would feel great. And then when it said, "Oh, you're ready to go, give it everything you've got," and I would feel like crap. So I found it almost the complete opposite of what it was supposed to tell me.
Well, that's interesting. I was kind of focusing on the health and safety side, but there's the other thing is just the negative PR. They put this out, it makes recommendations people don't agree with. They immediately go onto TikTok and start, trashing this thing. It could be a PR nightmare for them.
True.
Going back to Apple Watch accuracy, it is a coincidence that we just published this piece earlier today that I'll link in the show notes. Apple Watch excels at some fitness tracking measures, sucks at others. So researchers from the University of Mississippi conducted an extensive meta-analysis examining 56 studies that compared Apple Watch measurements against these, gold standard clinical reference tools. And they found that mean absolute percentage errors of 4.5% for heart rate monitoring and 8% for step counting. And those are within apparently the, consumer grade 10% error of fitness devices. But then you get to error rate when calculating calories burned, and the Apple Watch is 28% error rate there, which is 3 times higher than the acceptable error rate for measurement.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned the calories as well, because not only is there that issue with accuracy, but also increasingly this, if you look at apps like Lose It and MyFitnessPal, which do this sort of calculus of, this is how much you've eaten in terms of calorie, and this is how much you've worked out in terms of calories, and this is your basal metabolic rate in terms of calories, and you add it up and subtract it, and then it will say, you're in this much calorie surplus or deficit. And it will even give you projections on how much weight you should gain or lose based upon that. Mm-hmm. And personal view, I think that idea of calories in, calories out has just created a world of misery for people, because it's just so simplistic that for the vast majority of people, it's just not true. And so you get people who are doing these like calorie deficit diets, and they're practically starving themselves, and they're really harming their health, and they're not losing any weight. And so I really hope, because one of the other things that Mark Gurman said was that Apple might be getting into the calorie tracking game with food. And I personally hope that they don't, because I think it's just if you'll forgive the pun, it's a recipe for it's a recipe for eating disorders. And I'm hoping to see better from Apple than just simplistic calorie counting.
I want an app where visual intelligence. You can take a photograph of a piece of cake you're about to stuff in your face, and it'll tell you how many calories you're going to get. Which I know there's an app out there right now that does that. I think that really went viral and is really doing well. It's much easier than calorie counting, because I used to use Lose It and I couldn't stand it. Every thing, putting in all the, even though I ate the same thing day in and day out, it was still a tedious chore. But if I could take a picture of something before I eat it, and then it'll do all the calculations for me, I'd love that. Yeah, you don't think that would be helpful?
Maybe you could do
I don't think I'm going to get an eating disorder, but it might stop me stuffing my face with some cookies,
I think we know. I think we know basically what we should be eating, and sometimes we eat junk, and sometimes we don't. And I think everyone knows they should be eating like healthy fruit and veg, and they should. And the occasional chocolate, candy, cakes is going to do no harm, and you're going to be miserable if you don't enjoy yourself in life. That's the point of life, right? So I think it's just like being sensible about what you eat, and I think calories is too simplistic, and I personally don't think it helps.
I don't know. I think people have a lot of misconceptions about the food they eat. I mean, I know I certainly did. Oh, rice, healthy. I didn't know anything about the glycemic load and all the carbs it contained. Years and years I ate rice and thinking it was basically a health food. It's about brown rice anyway, and totally ignorant about its effects, and protein, stuff like that, being careful, being sure to eat enough protein was something I definitely hadn't paid attention to until recently. I thought that a sausage egg McMuffin was healthy, basically.
Whoa.
I worry about that stuff like blood glucose monitoring as well, because I think that there are some people who have medical conditions where this is really, really important for them to monitor. Obviously, if you have diabetes, it might be very important to monitor that. And having an Apple Watch that could do that accurately to a medical standard, so that you could just wear your Apple Watch and you've got all the glucose monitoring that you need, that would be awesome for people with diabetes. I think for everyone else who doesn't really have a medical need to do that, I think it'd do more harm than good. I think people obsess over these things. It creates a mentality of the worried well. Screening for diseases that you don't have can be counterproductive. It can sometimes result in overdiagnosis, overtreatment. And I think that's the flip side of Apple Watch. If you look at, and I'm sure we'll see this next week, at some point Tim Cook will talk about all the lives that Apple Watch have saved. But we never look at the other side of what about people that had unnecessary treatments because of Apple Watch. And I'm not saying that happens. It's just we don't look at that. And I think with any health screening intervention, it's really important to look at all sides of it. What are the positive sides? What are the negative sides? And, I haven't heard of any kind of medical authority saying that people without diabetes should be monitoring their blood glucose levels. And if Apple does introduce that for non-diabetics, I just wonder, is it going to have a positive impact, or is it actually going to be more harmful to their health?
Yeah.
That's my concern.
I would guess that, like, for the vast majority of people, it would be beneficial. But I hear what you're saying. I mean, it could easily push people who are possibly, into anorexia or eating disorders and other, harmful behaviors, possibly. There's definitely, I'd say, a proportion of people that would affect, yeah.
I do, but to be clear, I think I totally want Apple to release that feature, because for people with diabetes, it will be a game changer. So I think it's a brilliant feature. I just hope they market it in the right way.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the predictions, but before we get to that, we have one more sponsor to thank: Squarespace. Squarespace is the all-in-one platform where you can build your own website. I don't build my website with Squarespace, and you know what? It's a massive pain. I spent literal hours trying to get the prediction game that we're about to play figured all set up, just because I built this. I'm a computer scientist, so I think I can do it all myself, and eventually I do. But you know what? It takes hours. You have to dig deep into CSS and raw HTML. It's a big pain. You don't want to do that, especially if you just want to get your side project going up. You buy a domain, you want to book that, you want to get a landing page, you want to build a personal website, you want to recommend something to a friend. Even if you haven't built a website before, we are all users of Squarespace, because you encounter a Squarespace website every single day. Loads of people are using it. It's a great way to build a website. It's super easy to use. And you're not just picking from a template. They have this personalized website with a new guided design system where you can choose from professionally curated layout and styling options to make a unique online presence from the ground up, tailored to your brand and business and optimized for every device. Easily launch your website and get discovered fast with integrated, optimized SEO tools. That's a big one. So you show up more often to more people and grow the way you want. You can make checkout seamless if you'd like to sell something, whether you're selling your time or your content or your shirts or your merch or your podcast. With simple but powerful payment tools, you can accept credit cards, PayPal, and Apple Pay, and in eligible countries, offer customers the ability to buy now and pay later with Afterpay and ClearPay. Squarespace.com/CultCast for 10% off your first purchase of a domain or a website with code CultCast at checkout. That is squarespace.com/CultCast with code CultCast. Now, it's time to get in to our WWDC predictions. So for the second time this year, it is time to lay out our Apple event predictions. Irfan won earlier this year at the non-event group of random announcements that they had in February. But this time, one of us will be taking the crown. These are the rules. We have agreed on a list of 20 predictions for the event. For each one, we will vote yes or no, whether we think it will happen. Votes will be made live during recording. We have all of them laid out in our Google Doc here. 1 point will be awarded for each correct guess. Any disputes in judgment must be rolled on by Ed Hardy, a responsibility he has not been informed of or agreed to. I don't think he even listens to the show, so hopefully we don't disagree on anything.
This is going to give him a big head.
There have never been any disputes in scoring in the past ever. Listeners can submit their own votes using a Google form, which can be found at dgriffinjones.com/survey. That'll redirect you right to this form. There'll also be a link in the show notes. The highest listener score submitted before the event begins will be honored in the next episode. And I believe Irfan's going to be submitting his votes through there, just like all of the other listeners of our show. But we have the privilege of voting live.
Well, can I just say, as a long-time listener to the CultCast, I'm super stoked to finally get to play this game myself. You know, after listening to you guys play it, and I know that is wrong, I now finally get to have my say. So I'm super excited to be here for this week.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's both a blessing and a curse. When you listen and you're like, oh, I disagree with that, I would vote differently. But then you get to the hard question, and it's like, oh, I really have to put something down here.
I listen to this podcast when I'm taking my dog for a walk, and sometimes when I'm walking down La Rambla in Barcelona, and people will hear me shouting, "No, Lewis, no! Wrong! You're wrong!"
And then what happens?
And then
Does it turn out that I was actually wrong? Or?
No, you're always right, Lewis. When are you wrong?
Okay, everyone, I think I'm going to have to go out now. I've got a new rescue puppy in the house. He's been here for a few days, and he's been asleep beside me the whole time for this recording, and now I'm under attack. Now he's pulling out my headphone cable. I think he wants to go out. To pee.
Okay. Actually, if you put your predictions in this table at any point later, then you can come back.
Yes, I still get to take part.
All right. Thank you for joining us.
See you, Charlie.
Bye, Charlie.
Yeah.
Bye. So it's time for us to lay down our predictions, starting with the software category. Are we all ready?
Okay.
Prediction number 1. Glassy visionOS inspired redesign across all platforms.
Yes.
Okay, I think we're all in agreement there. Question 2. All OS version numbers updated to 26. What do we think?
Yes.
All right.
Yes, it's across the board.
Question 3. iPadOS gets menu bar and improved windowing features.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
This is boring so far.
This is do we believe Mark Gurman's sources? Then it's always a yes.
Well, this next prediction goes a little bit above and beyond, I think, what he said.
Okay.
iOS also gets free-form windowing on external displays. I think Mark Gurman's thing was just that it would support external displays. So I am a yes. Graham is a yes. Lewis, you vote no. What do you think?
I don't know, man. I don't know if they have the wherewithal to pull that off.
It's something you can already do it with Android phones, right? So I feel like it's a catch-up move for Apple there.
Do you think it's something anybody even really wants?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, it'd be awesome to turn your Yeah, to turn your
Really?
iPhone into a little sort of Mac Mini, a mini Mac Mini Mac Mini. It'd be great.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm going to stick with no, just to keep things interesting.
I mean, a lot of people like genuinely only have an iPhone and don't have a computer at all. Saying that, oh yeah, you can just plug a keyboard in this and plug it into a display and you can use it as if it's like, a pocket computer.
That's true.
Yeah, that'd be neat. So we've heard rumors that iOS is going to get a new icon shape. Do we think iOS users will be able to choose a custom icon shape?
No, that's craziness. That's crazy.
Well, I say
Wow.
yes, because they're doing a lot more customization now, so why not?
That's what I'm thinking too.
You could have little star-shaped app icons. Won't that be great?
Maybe it'll be like kind of like on the lock screen how you can pick like the thickness of the font of the clock. Maybe you'll be able to have a slider where you can pick the roundness of the icons.
Jeez.
Either have them be completely circular or like slightly round or very round or not round at all.
I feel like this is the difference with the Apple approach, though, that Apple has designers who make decisions for you because users have terrible taste.
That's always, that used to be the way. I don't know.
Yeah.
Recent things have started in the right, but I can't imagine they would make the app icon. No.
I think the shape of the icon shows that it's an app, right? And that square with the rounded corners tells us it's an app. And they introduced the kind of circle app icons. I guess for a while they were in macOS, and then they're in watchOS, they're in visionOS. I could imagine them moving across the board to circular, but then they would need to establish that as the design pattern that apps are circular. I think it would really undermine the usability if what an app looked like became really inconsistent on a single platform. I just don't think Apple would do that.
Next one, Game Center reinvented as Apple Games.
I'm going yes for that. And can I add a kind of an extra bonus point that they rename Apple Arcade Apple Games Plus?
You see, I'm voting no against this. I figured I would trap a few people with it, but I'm voting no because I think they're not going to call Apple Games. I feel like they've built up the Apple Arcade brand. And if anything, they might bring back the Game Center app and just rename it Apple Arcade and go the other direction and rename Apple Arcade Plus.
But has Apple Arcade
My
been
head's
very
spinning.
successful? I just get the impression that after the News app, it's like one of the least popular of Apple's services.
I don't know. I mean, I have Apple Arcade, but just because I have the Apple One bundle. But I think people understand what it is. I mean, it has the dedicated tab in the App Store that no one looks at. But
I think those. If you look at like Xbox and PlayStation, and this game subscriptions is huge, and Apple's just not doing it well at the moment. They don't have these AAA titles, and so I have to think that if they're digging in this area, they're wanting to create a much better subscription package than what they currently offer. And so yeah, you could say they've built Arcade as a brand, but it's a sort of dud product. So they might actually think it's great to relaunch it with a new name because we distance ourselves from before, and have they get some really big game developers for some AAA titles to launch Apple Games Plus with.
I mean, the other theory that I have is that they might just keep Game Center as it is and just like remake the Game Center app and just continue using the name Game Center without changing anything at all. Who knows? Next question. Next version of macOS called macOS Tahoe.
Griffin, you said no.
Wow.
I do say no. Tahoe, it just doesn't smell right to me. Because there's the Chevy Tahoe. And I know, this is an operating system and not a computer, but like Apple doesn't like to, fight with different brands.
It sounds like a slur as well.
There's also there's a Sequoia, though. Isn't there a truck called a Sequoia?
Oh, yeah, the Toyota Sequoia. That's right.
You don't like Tahoe because it sounds too much like taco. What we're waiting for, really, though, is macOS Turlock.
I mean, Apple has gone with some pretty stupid names for macOS before. Big Sur, El Capitan, but something about taco, it just doesn't smell right to me. I can't put my finger on it.
The other point that I don't think you mentioned this in the description of this or whatever when we were talking about the news story, but they were saying they were pointing out, Gurman pointed out that Tahoe is known for its like extremely clear water and reflections and things like that. And so in that way, it kind of goes with the, supposedly glossy UI change that everything gets. So I think it makes sense.
Except the UI is going to be cloudy, which is exactly what Tahoe isn't.
Frosty.
I was chatting to Griffin about this earlier,
but
and he was saying this is going to be a frosted glass user interface. And I was like, isn't it going to be glossy? And Griffin, you said no, because then you won't be able to see the buttons in front of the UI behind. So it's actually going to be cloudy. So, I mean, this is like an industrially polluted Lake Tahoe in some future dystopia when the park service is like shut down.
It's so rare that like marketing names leak. Like virtually none of the other macOS names have ever leaked before. So it's like, well, why is this one leaking now?
I really hope you're right, because it would be so cool if Mark Gurman got that wrong. I would be really, it would just be fun because he's never wrong. So,
Next question: support dropped for all Intel Macs.
Yeah, I'm going to go no too.
No. Leander, you think no Tahoe too, huh? Shocked.
Just for fun. I don't want to say the same thing as everyone else.
Graham, you saying yes?
I'm being a bit blithe there because I haven't really looked into how old this equipment is, but I just think it seems like about time for it to be retired, doesn't it?
Yeah, they've already exceeded the time that they spent supporting PowerPC.
Oh, really? Okay, I'm going to say yes then. I'll change my vote.
Oh, you can't change your vote. You've already put it down.
Oh no, I'm not going to win the paper crown.
And the other clue would be that this is a new UI which is responsive to movements and stuff like that. So it's going to be very heavy, this UI. Like when they introduced Aqua, and that made macOS 10 feel sluggish to begin with. And remember when they wanted to introduce what's that weird sort of desktop thing they added to iPad, or Stage Manager? And originally they wanted to limit Stage Manager to only the very latest hardware because they wanted all this visual bling in it. And what we're hearing is that this Solarium UI is going to have a lot of visual bling, and that in itself would be a reason to deprecate legacy hardware like Intel hardware.
I mean, yeah, but I mean, there is already like a lot of progressive blurs and translucency in macOS. Like, I don't think the Intel Mac Pro is going to be incapable.
But if every bezel around every button, the highlights move with the accelerometer motion, that doing that stuff, it's going to eat some CPU.
That's true. I don't know. I just think it might not be time yet. Next question. Here's a tricky one. Vision OS gets over 5 minutes of screen time.
Oh God, I hate these kinds of questions.
I'm going to go no too.
I'm going to say yes. I think they've got a lot to show with Vision OS. This is the first time they'll have a full 12 months between major versions, and I feel like they've probably got like a lot of features backed up for it. I mean, personally, when I use my Vision Pro, I'm like, a lot of these things still feel kind of rudimentary. Like the home screen still only lets you have like a single giant list of icons, and you can put them in folders like iOS 4. There's no app library. There's virtually no window management stuff. I just feel like they've got a lot of stuff to do there.
I think that they have. I absolutely do not think that Apple has given up on Vision OS and Vision Pro, and I'm sure there are amazing new products and new hardware coming. I think that this isn't the time for that. I think when they've got a hardware release to announce, they're going to talk about it again. But my instinct here is they will talk about it, but much more in terms of all these great new features that the other platforms are getting. We're bringing those to Vision OS too. That's what I think.
Okay. Next question in the Apple Intelligence section.
Shorter than the rest.
Yeah, weird how that happened. This is an evil one. Apple reintroduces a smarter agentic Siri.
I'm going to say yes.
I think yes. Surprisingly split on this one. Leander and I are yes. Lewis and Graham are no's.
Well, I think they need to, and they will. I just don't think that they'll be ready.
Right. I don't think they're going to write, a whole bunch more checks that their quote-unquote asses can't cash.
Yeah, they don't want to make John Gruber write another nasty piece about them. So I think that they're going to be more measured in their promises this year.
Well, they've iced him out now, haven't they?
Yeah, isn't that rude? I went to one of those talk show live things one time with Federighi and Joswiak. It was awesome. And to think that they just lashed out at him and it's like, oh, we're not going to let anybody go talk. That's not very classy.
I just feel like they can't say nothing. They're probably going to say something, and they might even show it off and explicitly say this time, we're still working on this. This isn't ready yet. But, they might still show it off. I don't know.
Maybe they'll make a joke about it, like they'll put Siri, still as smart as ever. I mean, they do occasionally poke fun at their screw-ups. It's possible.
Yeah. I think that what they promised last year, they will talk about again this year, and they will actually have it in the beta that they ship. Because this is something that developers need to support with their intentions and stuff, right? So I think there will be material for developers about the new Siri, and that it may well be included in the beta. But so when I'm saying no, it's like I do think that there will be last year's Siri will actually be in the beta that developers get next week, I think. But I don't think there will be anything beyond that. There won't be any of this Siri. I don't even know what agentic. I don't know what that is. I haven't really got my head around that yet. But I think we will finally get what was promised last year. That's what I think.
Okay. Next question. Redesigned health app adds AI-powered recommendations.
Can I put? I hope not.
That's not a choice, Graham, unfortunately.
That'd be the case for a lot of these, honestly, if that was an option. I'm going to say no. Because it was a small detail as a part of that story that they might be working on it, but it probably won't be ready yet until next
you're
spring.
right, yeah.
Right, might be delayed.
Yeah,
but I think they might mention it.
I mean, the thing is, it's interesting because that as a question will be indicative of this kind of Apple writing checks it can't cache. If they've got this feature, which they do plan to ship in the next 12 months, but it's maybe not till the end of the year or, next spring, are they going to talk about it like they did last year, or will they just keep stum this year and not say anything until they know they can ship it?
That's true. I mean, they haven't been afraid to announce something and then explicitly say, yeah, this is coming later.
Yeah, I mean, because they got burned last year, I think that, they're likely to be more conservative this year.
Okay. I think that's a good point.
Next question. AirPods get live translation.
Yes, just because I want it.
I want that so badly. My Spanish is terrible.
Well, your Catalan is probably even worse, isn't it?
Oh, Catalan even worse, but Apple doesn't support Catalan. It's the bane of my life.
I mean, yeah, that's the other thing. They might support live translation for all 12 languages that they have in the app.
Yeah, and
finally they'll be able to
translate
UK English to US English. Next question in the hardware section. New Mac Pro with M3 Ultra.
I'm going to
say no. I don't think we're going to see any hardware at WWDC.
Okay. I put down yes, because Mac Pros have typically been introduced at the event, and it's kind of weird that they're still selling a Mac Pro with an M2 in it. Next question. New studio display with Thunderbolt 5 and ProMotion.
I would love that because I want to buy that.
I'm going to say no too.
I just think they've got so much software stuff to talk about. I reckon it'll be a software-only thing.
Yeah, me too. Also a no. New smart home display announced. This rumored product that they've reportedly had in the oven for a while.
I'm going to say yes, just because I want that as well. I think that would be awesome.
If they were going to announce any hardware, I think it would be that, because you can't really announce Home OS without saying what it's going to run on. So, yeah.
Right. As soon as I typed no, that's what I thought. If they do announce this Home OS thing, then, oh well, too late.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I guess the rumor was that they have this thing ready, but they're waiting until the smarter Siri is ready to ship. And I did vote yes on them at least announcing that again, but I don't know. It doesn't feel like it's time for that yet. And I'm sure it keeps Tim Cook up at night knowing that there's a warehouse full of these things that they can't ship. But
I think that if they were, when they ship this new Home OS device with a screen, if they do, I think it would be huge news from an Apple perspective. And I think there would have been something in the tease invite. I think because the tease invite is just so much focusing on Solarium and the new UI that I think, it's like I'm just not getting home vibes from that invite.
That's fair. I guess we should mention that they added a tagline to it earlier this week called Sleek Peak.
Oh, peak! Do you think there's going to be another mountain? Maybe not a lake, maybe a mountain.
Oh, yeah.
Next question. Any other hardware announced?
Nope.
Nope. All right, we're all no's. Pretty simple.
Is
Now
this
we're in
really
the
a rumor?
miscellaneous
Event
section.
opens with silly, lighthearted video? Really?
Event opens with a silly, lighthearted video. A lot of people are thinking, well, Apple's developer relations are not great right now. That would probably be a little ill-received if they did that.
Come on, really?
What do we think?
Need a little fun starter.
Yeah.
I never find those things funny. They're so zany, and I don't get them. Like jokes about Craig Federighi's hair or Eddie Q's karaoke. It leaves me cold. I don't get it.
I don't find it funny either.
The only one I did think was funny was that Larry David video that they didn't run.
Oh, with the Siri?
It was about Larry David played the head of the Apple editorial board or the App Store. He was the head of the App Store deciding what apps got into the App Store. And it was a very problematic Larry David Curb Your Enthusiasm style video. And I'm amazed Tim Cook actually ever commissioned that, because Larry David is going to push things as far as he possibly can, and he really did, and he pushed it way outside of Tim Cook's comfort zone.
Yeah.
And they never ran the video.
Occasionally it's uploaded to YouTube, and it's on there for like a week until Apple takes it down again.
Oh, too bad. What about the one where he's in his car and he's swearing at Siri? Was that for Saturday Night Live?
That was actually
Curb Your
part of Curb Your
Enthusiasm.
Enthusiasm.
Oh, okay.
I've reenacted that almost weekly ever since seeing it.
That's one that everyone can relate to.
Next question. Apple plays a trailer for the F1 movie.
Yeah, that's got to be. They're putting a big push behind this.
I always say yes on those when I'm saying no this time, so they'll probably do it.
Oh, look, this is where I win. Look, because everyone said no.
This is where I win.
Does the trailer have to be a trailer versus, for example, when they do the kind of sexy product video showing the new version of iOS, and at one point it will show a movie playing, and it might be a clip of the F1 movie. Does that count?
No.
Okay.
That's probably something we would have
We'd
to
have
debate.
to ask Ed Hardy, but
I think I was thinking I would draw the
Ed
line
Hardy
like,
will determine that. He's the Supreme Court of Culture Mac.
if they just mention it or like have like a promotional image on screen, that wouldn't count. But even if they played like a so-called teaser trailer, I was thinking that would. So I don't know. I guess we'll have to determine that. Next question. Apple name drops another big game coming to the Mac.
Yeah.
oh god, so tiresome.
Okay, we're all yeses. That's hilarious. What do you think it's going to be this time? Are any of us tuned in gamers?
Tic-tac-toe.
Letterpress 2.
Okay. Last question. The event runs over 1 hour, 45 minutes.
Yes.
Dang it, I keep getting burned by this one too. I'm going no.
I'm going no.
Leander's going yes, yes.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes, yes!
Still make it shorter than this podcast.
Okay, well.
Griffin's going to edit
question.
it down to a snappy 43 minutes.
Well, our listeners can submit their own answers to these questions if they dare at dgriffinjones.com/survey. Link is in the show notes. We will announce the winners next week. And, of course, WWDC is next Monday. How are we feeling overall? Last straw poll.
I'm already tired.
I feel like there's been a lot of negative vibe around Apple over the past few weeks, and I'm really hoping that WWDC turns things around for them. I think they need some good news, and I think WWDC may well provide it.
And I think the software that changes, the new UIs that unified across all the different platforms, it sounds really exciting. And I read a really interesting thing this week. Actually, it was remember that post, Lewis, that we were talking about?
Oh right, yeah.
From Sebastian DeWitt. He is the developer of a Halide app, and on his blog had a really interesting breakdown about how the UI might look and how it might function. And it was really illuminating. I learned a whole bunch of stuff that I didn't know before. And it sounds quite exciting. It's in a way a little bit of a return to skeuomorphism, bringing back some physicality to the UI. And it sounded, it was a really interesting breakdown, and it made me much more excited about it than I felt before I read it.
Yeah,
we should put that in the show notes too.
His mock-ups look really brilliant. If it looks something like that, I'm going to be super happy.
Yeah. There's been all kinds of crazy mock-ups that have been floating around, and some of them really are ugly. I mean, some of them crazy looking. And there was an interesting mock-up actually a couple of days ago. I don't know. Did you ever get a chance to look into that, Lewis? I think. Sorry, Griffin. It showed a mock-up of a glassy like button that actually reacted to a light. Someone was moving a lamp around, and I thought, how the hell are they doing that? And of course, then I realized, well, they can't unless they have some special sensor. And I don't know. iPhones have a light sensor, don't they, or a proximity sensor? Maybe they could, but definitely you couldn't do it on an Apple Watch, and you definitely couldn't do it on, maybe a camera would work. I don't know, maybe a camera would work, right? A front-facing camera could be used for that. Anyway, it looked amazing.
They could go back to like iOS 6 where they would fake it just by using the gyroscope on your phone. Just like when you wiggle it around, it'll just move the light source, and it'll just always imagine the light source as being above you. Yeah. And that could kind of fake it.
Yeah. But
take less energy.
That would give them the requisite sort of physicality that they're going for. So that would work even if it didn't track the ambient lighting around it. But it looks really exciting. I'm really, really excited to see it. I love a new interface.
I'm overall excited about the iPhone. Not excited to run the betas because that's just my least favorite 3 months of the year. And also, I would say excited but scared for macOS because macOS is where I do my work. And I mean, Alan Dye has not instilled confidence in me that he's going to make the Mac better. I'll just put it at that. But excited overall, I'd say. So I think that about wraps it up. That's all the CultCast we have for you all this week. But the fun continues. Lewis Wallace is on Twitter at Lewis Wallace. Leander Canny is at L Canny. And you can read his daily musings in the Cult of Mac Today newsletter, which you can find at newsletters.cultofmac.com. Thanks to our very special guests this week. Graham Bauer is on Blue Sky at Graham Bauer. Charlie Sorrell is on Mastodon at Mr. Charlie. And you can hear them together on the Apple Core podcast. I understand this is a very timely episode of the show coming out sometime soon.
Indeed, with yourself as a guest, I might mention.
That is right. I am on Mastodon and Blue Sky at D. Griffin Jones, and you can join the week-long discussion with me and the other govs in the Cult Club Discord by going to support.thecultcast.com. The Cult Club is honestly one of the best places to be during the Apple event because we'll be chatting live during the keynote, so be sure to get your ticket inside at support.thecultcast.com. You can read all of our WWDC coverage at Cult of Mac. It's a website, and we're on social media platforms as well. This has been the CultCast, the best 30-plus minute Apple conversation you're going to hear all week long. New episodes of the CultCast come out every Thursday night. I want to thank everyone for listening, for watching, and we will see you all next time. Have a great weekend.
See ya.
Woohoo! I didn't hear a next time. Come on, Griffin.
My voice
do that in post.
It just doesn't do that. It's fun. It's weird. I try and just weird whistling noise comes out.